In this video, I'm going to give you a few hints on completing Lab 9. And so let's start with the Lab 9 assignment document. So I'm going to open that Word document. And before you begin, it recommends familiarizing yourself with the database content in Module 7 again. And also, you should have already cloned the IMDB Browser project and watched the videos on the project. So let's look at the requirements. So you're going to be connecting to the same database as you connected to in the database assignment. And most of you wrote a query that fetched some data from the names database and then displayed it to the console. This time around, we're basically just going to be adding a user interface to the work that you did there. Now, if you didn't use the names database and you're not quite sure where to go from there, or maybe you had trouble completing the database lab, I've actually provided a sample query that you can start from. However, if you have a different query from your previous lab, feel free to use that, and I encourage you to do that. Assuming you are starting from this query, though, what you're going to see is going to be a table of results that looks something like this. This particular query is fetching name, year, gender, name count, and total from the all data table, where the username is some value, and you're going to want to use a parameter in your query for that. And then the gender is either M or F, and you're going to also want to use a parameterized query for that. So these two values you want to supply through your user interface. And then for this query, I've ordered by year. And so what you get back is basically the popularity of the name MARC for male babies on a year-by-year basis. And this is just the first 5 rows of that. Now, I've also included this total column, which is a column in the all data view, but don't feel like you have to include that if you didn't include it in the previous lab. So the idea here is that you're going to provide a user interface that's similar to what I did for the IMDB browser, where the user can select, for example, they can enter a name into a text box, and they can select a gender, either male or female, and then the results that come back out of the database are going to be displayed in a tree view. Now, for things with only 2 values like gender, you probably will want to use something like radio buttons. So radio buttons are a good choice for selecting among a small number of different options. You definitely don't want to use radio buttons, and you almost certainly don't want to use a combo box if you're having the user enter something like a name, though, because there are tens or hundreds of thousands of different names that a user might want to enter, some of which aren't even going to be current popular names, and so wouldn't appear in a combo box at all. So rather than trying to have 10,000 names in a combo box and choosing the right name from a drop-down menu, which is completely unworkable, really the right thing for entering a name is probably a text box. If you are asking the user to enter a year in the console-based version of your program, then probably you want to have a text box for that as well. Gender, you probably want radio buttons, and if you have any other questions, feel free to ask the instructor. So you probably don't know how to use radio buttons in tkinter because that wasn't part of the IMDB Browser project. So one of the hints I'm going to give you is how to actually use radio buttons in a GUI. So let's go ahead and start doing that. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up PyCharm, and I'm going to make a new project. And let me call this gender radio buttons. And then I'm going to use my previously configured interpreter that has PyGubu installed already. And I'm going to put this in a new window. And then the main interface I'm going to lay out using PyGubu. So let me go ahead and cd into this project folder. And this is in gender radio buttons. And then I'm going to run PyGubu Designer from here. And then let's just lay out a simple interface. So the first thing I want is going to be a frame at the top. And I'll call that top frame. And it's going to be grid layout and sticky on all sides. And then I'm going to let it stretch in the rows and columns. So it takes up all the available space. And then just for look and feel, let's go ahead and put 10 pixels of padding all the way around it. And then let's start with a label at the top. So that's going to be a label. And we'll call this top label. And let's give it the text, please select a gender. And then I could set a font, so let's go ahead and do 16 point bold Arial. Bold Arial. Okay, and then this should be grid layout as well. And this is going to be centered in row 0, column 0. And then underneath that, I'm going to have a frame for my radio buttons. And this is going to be row 1, column 0. And I'll center that as well. So not sticky on either side. And inside of here, I'm going to add 2 radio buttons. So here's radio button 1 and radio button 2. So radio button, and actually these are both going to be grid. And I could stack them top and bottom like this, or I could put them side by side. I think I'm going to put them side by side just to save a little room. So the first one's going to be row 0, column 1. I'm sorry, row 0, column 0 for the first one. And the second one's going to be row 0, column 1. And then neither of these is stretchy. So the text here is going to be male. And the text here is going to be female. And I need a little separation here. So what I'm going to do is on the layout for button 2, I'm going to add 10 points of X padding around that just to spread them out a little bit. And then at the bottom, I'm going to have another label. So this is going to be row 2, column 0, and this label is going to be centered as well. Let's go ahead and put 10 pixels of padding around all of this. And let me have 10 pixels of padding around that frame. So everything's just spaced out a little bit. And then this thing, the text is initially going to be empty. So this is going to be my output label. And I'm going to want to set the value of this. And so the way I make this settable is by attaching a text variable to it. So the text variable for this label is going to be output label variable, and it's of type string. So now I can set it. And then for this radio button, I want to run an action every time the user sets the value of it. So this is going to have, under command, it's going to have a callback radio button. Actually, let's make it gender changed, or gender selected, I think is good. Gender selected. And then for the female button, that's also going to call gender selected. And then to actually figure out which one of these is set, I want to, and also to put them in a group, the way you put these radio buttons in a group so that only one of them is selected at a time is to associate both buttons with a variable. So that's this variable here under specific. It's going to basically define a group of radio buttons, and then only one of these buttons can be selected at a time. And what's going to happen is whichever one is selected, this value here is going to get stored in that variable. And then variables are bound to these user interface widgets. And so if I change the state of the interface widget, it changes the value of the variable. Or if I set the value of the variable, that can change the state of this interface widget. So for the male button, the value is going to be M, and then the string is going to be gender variable, which is a string. And then for this female button, the value is going to be F, and the variable is going to be gender variable here as well. Okay, now I don't need to attach IDs to these because I'm not actually going to be referencing them directly in the code. I'm just going to be waiting for actions on them. But I'll go ahead and do gender female radio button and gender male radio button. And I think I'm going to put my stretch, all of my stretch is going to be here in that frame, the frame that has the radio buttons. So let's go ahead and put the weight on both row and column there. Everything else should be centered and not stretchy. So let's preview it, see what we get. Okay, that's about what I was expecting. Good enough. So that's it for the user interface so far. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. And then I'm going to save it into my gender radio buttons project as genderbuttons.ui. And then I'm going to go to code, generate the sample code from here, copy it, go to my gender buttons UI, and I'm going to select all and replace all of the main code with the sample code. So just as before, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to move the import of tkinter to the top. And I'm also going to import tkinter.ttk as ttk. And that should be everything I need for now. So this is going to load gender buttons UI. This is making a root and it's passing into the gender buttons app constructor. So I need to add master here. And then if I have it, I can use it. So now what I need is I need some variables. I need to get my self dot. So gender variable is equal to builder.getVariable, gender variable. And then I'm going to go ahead and refactor this builder property to be under builder. And I'm going to do the same thing with this main window. And I think that's it for that. And then what else do I need? So um, I need to implement my action for gender selected. So self dot genders. Actually, it filled that in for me already. That's good. So all I'm going to do here is I'm going to print for now self dot under gender variable dot get. So it's going to get the currently selected value and it's going to print it. And then later on, I'm going to use it to set the gender label variable. Pretty sure that's what I called it. So it's going to display that at the bottom. Let's go ahead and test what we have so far. Okay, so it's not gender label variable, so let me double check. So here's my, it's my output label variable. So let me call that output label variable. And output label variable. And output label variable. Okay, so I'm not using that yet. All right. So now if I click on one of these radio buttons, I get M, F, M, F. And then if I want to display it, I can say self dot under output label variable dot set equal to gender colon plus self dot under gender variable dot get, which is mref. So let's run that. So gender M, gender F, and that's good. Now the only other thing that I want to do here is when I start this up, it starts it up with female selected. And that's just because this was the last one to appear. What I actually want to do here is start it up with neither selected. And the way you can do that is by setting self.under gender variable. You can call the set method to set the initial value to an empty string. And that will cause neither male nor female to be selected, like so. So they select the first one, it's gender, select the second one. If you did want to start with the default though, you could pick whichever one you want as the default, like so. So now male is the default one. Or back to female. Okay, so I think that's everything you need to use radio buttons in your project. And if you have any questions, be sure to email your instructor or post them in the question and answer discussion board.